Hi, I'm Madeline James, and welcome to the third part of my world building guide series. If you haven't watched the earlier parts, I suggest you go back and do that. I will link the first video in the series, but these videos are all going to sort of build off of each other and the maps that we've already created, because this process is complicated. So from the last two videos, we have our sort of plate boundary map with the different types of boundaries, the forms of our land masses, hotspots, that sort of a thing. We have also created our physiographic region map right here. And we have a updated landmass map based off those, physiographic regions that we added, which sort of adjusted our initial land masses. But now we are going to talk about elevation. I will note for this step in particular, coming up with elevation the way we're going to is not 100% necessary for most fantasy world builders. Only those that really enjoy the process of getting into the science and having it really come to life in front of you and, want a more realistic and developed world. At this point, if you're on part 3 of this series, I'm assuming that's you. So just carry forth, but if for some reason you're watching this and you're not actually one of those people, which, why are you here? But there are tons of guides online about how to come up with elevation. So if you want to go that route, you can go that route, but we're going the deep route. For those of you carrying on with me, we're going to need new copies of your maps. So I would just take your updated landform map, sort of like I have this one, which has my archipelagos and all that sort of stuff on it, my island chains, and just make a few copies of that. If you're doing this digitally, set yourself up to make more layers, and you will also want your maps from before handy because we're going to reference those for this. And let's get started. So the first step is we're going to create the key for our elevation range. You can obviously just copy what Earth has, but these are fantasy maps. So if there is a reason for you where you want, the elevation scale to be bigger than it is on Earth, then keep that in mind when creating this scale and just kind of account for that. But for a reference, most of the land on Earth above sea level is under 500 feet in elevation. The highest elevation on Earth is Mount Everest, which is 29,000 feet. And as a quick note, you can have individual mountain peaks that are higher than the rough elevation of the mountain range around it, but we're not going to account for that like top peak. This is kind of the average height of mountain ranges when we're looking at that, because we're talking about the effects of this impacting air circulation mostly, which having one peak that's taller than the others isn't really going to have an effect on that, particularly at the global scale. Maybe a little bit regionally, but at this level we mostly just cared about the mountain range itself, so you can have higher peaks that we can deal with later on, but just keep that in mind. I'm going to draw my key using a similar elevation range as Earth and elevation maps that you would see of Earth. This is the elevation scale I'm going to be using. I have purple, which is essentially ice covered, which is just domed areas that won't have a huge effect on air circulation. We will have dark green, which is essentially sea level or our lowest elevation. We will have light green or lowlands. We will have orange or midlands, dark orange or highlands, and red, which is our mountaintops. Okay, so now that we have sort of our elevation range key set up, we're going to move on to establishing the severity of our plate boundaries. And the reason we want to do this is because it'll help us have an idea of how much elevation to sort of apply to these areas based off how severe it is. So for example, a mountain range created at a convergent plate boundary, if that boundary is more severe, which we're going to have severity kind of mean how much of an effect it has had on the crust. So not just, how quickly these plates are moving towards each other, how much force is being pushed towards them, but how long they've been active, and whether or not they're still active. So, a very severe convergent plate boundary is going to have a greater elevation range, or elevation and height in both, and how far out that's going to expand compared to a less severe convergent boundary, which might just have like a little bit of hilling. I'm going to recommend a range of 1 to 5, where 1 is the least severe and 5 is the most severe. Alright, so I'm going to go through here and just add severities. A 1 to 5 scale, where 5 is extremely severe and 1 is extremely mild. So for convergent boundaries, or on this map, the pink boundaries, where you have larger plates moving together, these will be on the more severe end of the spectrum, while smaller ones, or ones that aren't as directly colliding, will be on the less severe end. So like over here, I'm going to give this a 5. We'll give that a 5. This is, again, I only have it moving really in this direction that hard from this plate, but not this one. So I'm going to have this be maybe a 3, we'll say 4. This is going to be pretty mild. We'll give this a 1. We'll give this one a 3. We'll give this a 4. This a 3. And this a 2. And then for divergent boundaries, if there is a severe convergent boundary on the other side of the plate, this boundary is likely more severe as well. So let's see, divergent is blue. We don't need to give these severity levels to oceanic ones, which actually means I don't need to do any divergent boundaries. So that'll be fine. So we'll go through and do our hotspots then. You can just select them fairly randomly, make a few a level 5, most 2 to 4s, and a few 1s. So we'll say, which ones did I kind of draw to look more severe? This one is pretty severe looking, right? So we'll give this one a 5. Let's see. This one is pretty severe to be seen at this level, so we'll give that a 5 too. And then, let's see, we'll give this one a 3. We'll do a 4 here. This one a 2. This will be a 2. This will be a 2. And I'm not giving any 1s personally just because I didn't draw that many. And I probably wouldn't really be able to see those much anyway. If you want to get more granular for a long boundary, you could have different severities at different locations for some of these. So like I could have a 5 here and a 4 here for this convergent boundary. But I'm going to keep this relatively simple for now. I did forget about this boundary. But let's see, if this is moving really sharply here, it's probably a little bit lower here, so we'll give this a 3. Did I forget any other ones? Right up here. I'm going to give this one a 3. And you'll notice some of my mountain ranges that are from not active boundaries right now, or I'm not giving severities to. We'll handle those kind of separately, but they're not active boundaries, so we don't need severities for the boundaries themselves. Okay, so let's jump into creating our elevation map. And you will notice that I sort of have ice caps sectioned here as one of the elevation ranges, and the reason for this is the pattern of elevation over an ice cap is particular in how it affects things like air circulation. That's because ice sheets and caps are sort of like domes. So the increase in elevation is going to be gradual, and in general they're going to be higher in elevation or at the center or near the source of it, and kind of taper down as you get towards the edges. So basically the landscape won't really have as big of an effect on air circulation. And once we get into climate ranges, these ice caps are all going to be the EF climate type. So we kind of already know what they are. We don't need to be overly fussy about these bits. For most maps, a single color for this is going to suffice, but if for some reason you have significant regions that are going to be covered in ice caps, or these areas are very important for how you're going to be using this world, then you can sort of break it down a little bit further. Probably going to as much as like 3 shades of purple for the elevation of these ice caps is probably going to be perfectly good for any application of this. And basically, again, the centers of these are going to be the tallest, the edges are going to be the lowest in elevation, and you can sort of take into account where mountain ranges are underneath of this, because you do have that in some of your maps. So you can do that if you need to. We're just going to do one color for ice caps. The Greenland ice sheet, as an example, ranges from 3,000 to 10,000 feet in most areas. Wow, look at me not following my own guide. So ice covered. The next place to go is going to be mountain ranges, and I sort of like the top-down idea for working through this, both because your mountain ranges are going to affect the things around it, but having a plain isn't really going to affect the things around it, if that makes sense. You'll see as we keep going. But in determining, you know, how high to make your mountain ranges and how like far they should extend, we're going to think about a few things. First, we want variability. These shouldn't all be the exact same height. These all shouldn't extend the same amount. And these are significantly more complicated than we're really going to talk about here. And there are a lot of factors I'm going to mention, but you can just kind of go with your intuition here to an extent. So we're going to start with your convergent plate boundaries. These sort of boundaries, for the most part, are going to result in your highest mountain ranges. They will also tend towards being less steep than your oceanic continental boundaries. And again, the more severe the boundary that you've marked, the more spread each level of elevation will have. The ridgeline of the mountains will be the highest, and then they will gradually get lower as you move away from the ridge. You can have one side of the mountain range sort of step down more gradually if you think it makes sense that that side of the crust would have been higher in elevation when the plates collided. An example of this is the Himalayas, where you see there's a lot of plateauing on one side and on the other side less so. Yeah, so we're going to start with convergent continental boundaries, which are going to be like this mountain range, and this mountain range here. Level 5 boundaries will have the most red, which, let's see, I have a 4, a 3, and a 4. So those won't, I won't have any of those. Level 4 will have red just at the ridges. So here is going to be red along the ridges. I do have this a little bit wider, so I am going to kind of have that be sort of like, treat it sort of like a 4.5. So we'll sort of have that. Down here, this one's a 4.2, sort of the same thing, so sort of right along in here. Okay. Level 3 will just have dark orange at the ridges. Level 1 to 2 will only get to orange. So I think that's all the red we're going to have there. So we'll move on to orange, or, you know, dark orange. I think I have this called dark orange on my, like, dark orange and not yellow, but orange is dark orange, it's fine. So level 3 will have dark orange at the ridges, which is going to be this one. We'll just do that. So then we need to kind of go around these. I don't want to go too far because once I kind of get the elevations here, I kind of want those to blur together. But I could definitely go around and sort of start this off. So do some of this. I'm gonna go around here as well. Okay, those are the only 3 main ones I have. I'm not going to go any lower in elevations right now because I want to sort of blend it. Moving on to convergent continental oceanic boundaries. If you remember when we were putting these together, the angle of subduction has a big factor here. So for mountain ranges that are close to the boundary, you're going to have a steep subduction zone, and for mountain ranges that are a little bit further away from the boundary, you're going to have a more shallow subduction zone. In general, the spread of these mountain ranges will not be as great as with convergent continental. So for mountain ranges created by a steep subduction angle, you're not going to see a lot of spread in these mountain ranges, but you will see a good bit of height. If you look at the Andes mountain range in South America, this is a good example of this. But then for mountain ranges that are created by a shallow subduction angle, you will see that the spread of these mountain ranges is going to be pretty significant, but they're not going to be quite as tall. But convergent continental oceanic boundaries, so that's going to be along here, That's going to be here, 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 and here. So over here, I have a very severe at a level 5, and it's also a pretty a pretty steep subduction zone there. So severe, steep angle, red at the ridgeline. So we won't have it extend to the farthest ends of that. But we'll have this go down through here. Again, it's going to meet that other red, and then go to like maybe there. So it's a thin red line along the ridges, and then it will kind of fairly quickly go through the level, so it'll be a pretty narrow kind of orange. You don't want to go all the way to the shore there. Like that. Okay, so it kind of joins up nicely. So then for, let's see, over here, this is a level 2. And this is also, I can't tell if I was trying to make that steep or shallow, but it looks a little bit shallower and a little bit lower in severity. So this is mostly going to have what I said was orange, which is kind of yellow. So, although because it's pushing on a multiple areas, I'm going to give it a small area of orange anyway, just because it's sort of not too shallow, but not that steep either. We'll sort of go through and do this for most of here. Yeah. Okay, so then along here, this is going to be a little bit shallower than this range, right? So it's a little bit further from the coast. I have it slightly more spread out, but not significantly. It's sort of like a mid-shallow versus steep in the middle there. And it's a level 3, so that's not going to be as severe of a boundary. So we're going to give it just the littlest bit of our darker orange color, just kind of, you know, maybe a little bit more in here, and then maybe some like in here. Not that much, just a little bit. And then the rest of this is going to be this Midlands color. And again, because it's a little bit more shallow, I'm going to give it a little bit more spread. Let this spread out a little bit more. Roughly like there. And then this is a 3. This is a little bit, again, on that steeper side, so we're going to have it go up into the orange just a little bit. And then give it some yellow. Okay. We'll add a little bit of yellow in here. Just to kind of give a hint of that. And then up here, this is definitely shallower. So we'll just have a large area in here. So then the other type of mountain range, well, one of the other types of mountain ranges that we have are mountain ranges from Inactive Boundaries. And these are going to be older mountain ranges, meaning that they will have been undergoing erosion for a lot longer. So that's going to mean these are going to be a little bit less tall, and that sediment is going to have spread out a little bit more, so you're going to see these sort of acting like the shallow subduction zone, convergent continental boundaries. Even if this is continental, these won't be as high. They're going to be a lot more spread out and less severe. So that's going to be this range, and here. So I'm definitely not going to have any red. During the most severe areas, I might have a little bit of orange, just if these were like really, really great mountain ranges, but I won't have a lot. So maybe we'll say I'll have a little bit kind of going into here, maybe like just a little bit. Maybe the littlest bit right here along the center of this. And then otherwise, these are all going to be midlands. So we'll give this a nice kind of spread here. Then your most active hotspot volcano is going to be the highest in elevation, and then go down as you look at the old inactive calderas. If your active one is red, your next one might be orange, and then the rest really wouldn't be noticeable. And again, for your less severe hotspots, these probably won't show up elevation-wise on your map either way. So that was isolated continental hotspot volcanoes. For hotspot oceanic island chains, I would have the island over the currently active hotspot being at the maximum height indicated by your severity level, so red for 5. The rest of them would maybe reach orange, and then you're going to see around these sort of peak areas, it's going to get gradually lower all the way down to green, and a lot of these mountains, I guess, are underneath of the surface, so they're really not going to spread out as far as any of the mountain ranges we've looked at before. I will include an elevation map of an island chain or two so that you can sort of see get an idea of what these look like. Alright, so then hotspot mountain ranges, let's see, isolated continental ones. Let's see, I have this one, which none of mine are super severe. So we'll go with a little bit of orange here. The rest of these are going to be a little bit quicker. We're going to sort of step through the remaining physiographic regions and what elevations they will have. The first one will be plateaus. The plateaus around mountain ranges or volcanoes will be roughly proportional to the elevation of those mountain ranges. Maybe 1 to 2 levels or colors lower in elevation than the mountain range itself at its ridge. Okay, so plateaus, 1 to 2 levels of color. This is going to be red, so I won't have any red plateaus, but I can have orange and yellow plateaus, and I think this makes sense as a very heavily plateaued region. I'd expect a little bit of plateauing in here, so maybe just like, and maybe a little bit in here too. Your coastal plains are going to be your lowest in elevation. These are flat, low-lying plains, and they will be dark green, which is essentially your sea level color. So now we're going to start at the sea level. These are going to be our coastal plains, which again, here you'll sort of see those were this light green color, mainly. I sort of already had my plateau regions in here, which I guess I did sort of already follow. A little bit of plateauing over here. Let's figure that in a little. Okay, so coastal plains. So that was kind of all of this area. All of your inland plains are going to be a little bit higher in elevation, probably your light green color in most places. Same thing is going to apply for your glaciated regions. You treat your lowland glaciated regions as coastal plains, so they'll be that dark green color, and treat your shield regions like inland plains, so they'll be light green. And then for your archipelagos, because these have kind of been compressed down, you're mostly going to be looking at dark green, maybe some lighter green for the center of the larger ones. Okay, so inland plains and shield regions, which on this map I did switch these. but that's fine. So this is going to be roughly our elevation map. Alright, so now that we have our elevation map, in the next step we're going to get into air circulation, water circulation, high and low pressure zones, and we'll be getting really close to climate after that. If you are still watching this, I'd love to know your thoughts down below, and if there's anything you think would really improve these videos for the purpose of people following along and trying to world build on their own, I would absolutely love to know. But otherwise, I'm going to wrap up here and move on to the next video. I will see you next time.